Aren't you comfortable in your chair? Can you tell me who you are and how you spell your name?
My name is David Lacey, D-A-V-I-D. Last name Lacey, L-A-C-Y.
Thank you. Stay.
Thank you, Judge. David, how do you know Dacia Lacey?
She's my daughter.
Okay. Is she your only child?
Yes.
And did you raise her from the time she was a baby?
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk to you about Dacia's children. How many children has she had?
She had a total of 4.
Okay. And are you a part of her grandchildren's lives?
To a certain degree. Out of all the grandchildren, the one I'm closest with is Grace, because of the fact that at the time she was living with me, so we went through the whole pregnancy all the way up to birth. Same thing with Tyleese, the first child. She was living with me at the time all the way up to birth, so that situation is a little bit different, but I don't have a close relationship with her because her father has her.
And that's Tyleese?
That's Tyleese.
How old is Tyleese?
Tyleese, we're going on 13
Okay.
now.
And so Tyleese lived with her father?
Yes.
But when she was a baby, you had more contact with her?
Yeah, because like I said, Dacia was living with me at the time, and so during that time, I did have Tyleese because we lived under the same roof. Yeah.
And then you mentioned Grace. So when Grace came along, Dacia again moved in with you?
Yeah.
Okay. And then her next child, what is that child's name?
The next child after that would be Julius Jr.
Okay. And you said you aren't as close with him. Is his father also present in his life?
Well, was because of the Julius Jr., the father, or to be what we thought was a part of his life also until the DNA proved otherwise. And during that time, he did have a lot of contact with Julius Jr. and we also at the time, because of the time that Dacia had him and to spend time with the assumed dad at the time. So I did kind of have a relationship with him, but on that situation, because I didn't know that she was pregnant until a few weeks before she was ready to give birth, so that kind of set a different precedence of being close to that child too.
With Julius?
Yes.
Okay. So safe to say sometimes Julius would be with his dad and he would get her to spend time with her?
Yes.
Okay. Now I want to talk about Alona Lacey, who's also your granddaughter. When did you learn about Alona Lacey?
Well, when I ended up finding out about her was the day she was born. Okay. So I had no idea, no clue at all until I want to say it was my niece actually told my mom that Dacia was giving birth to another child. And at that time, my mom, she called me. I was at work finding this information out, and I'm floored. I'm like, I had no idea, no clue about anything. So I was like, well, I wanted to wait until Dacia called and tell me to let me know this information. And it was several weeks before I even found that out when she called on me about Alona.
Okay. So you said several weeks after she was born, Dacia finally called you and let you know that she had another baby.
Yes.
I want to direct your attention to August 29th of 2022. On that date, had you had the opportunity to meet Alona yet?
No. At that time, we had a prior conversation that Grace was like, hey, when you come see your granddaughter, and this was...
Dacia.
I'm sorry, I'm in Dacia. And at this time, my reaction was, it's been this long before you even mentioned her to me. I mean, wait till this weekend. It's not going to be, a couple more days. It's not going to be, a big deal. And that's the way I looked at it. So I was going to visit her that upcoming weekend, but the situation happened.
Okay. Where was Dacia living on August 29th of 2022?
She was staying in one of our family property. We do have some rental homes, and she was staying in one of them.
Okay. Was she in rent to stay there?
No, but it was supposed to be a sale to make payment arrangements, but none of that has really ever fell through. Okay. So, like I say, my mom is right now the property owner, so it was one of those things that we knew she didn't have a place to stay, so we just kind of dealt with it that way.
Okay, to let her stay there?
Yes.
Instead of in the past she moved in with you?
Exactly.
Okay. And did you receive a call from Dacia on that day?
Yes.
When she called you, can you describe that conversation?
The day when she called me to let me know of Alona passing away, the way it came across to me, I thought it was a joke, because it just didn't sound like it was a urgent thing at first. But after the conversation went on, I was like, well, maybe she might be serious, and it kind of floored me because I'm like, this doesn't even sound right. So I was actually working. Actually, my job from where the property is was only like maybe a 7-minute, drive from there to where she was staying.
So did you go to the house?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and when you arrived, what was going on there?
About the time I got there, it was already a crowd of people there, coroner, police officers. Everyone's already on the scene. Something I might have been the last one that got this, this phone call to arrive on the scene. So the time I got there, of course, they didn't let me enter the house. They was like, well, the detective will come out to speak to you in a few minutes. And at the time, I think when I met Detective Hagley at the time, it kind of gave me an idea what was going on and how what the situation was.
Were there some other people there too, like some friends or?
Yeah.
How did you eventually see Dacia that day?
It was after, I think, the coroner, whatever all the information that the detectives was needing to speak to her about before they let her come outside, before the coroner was able to remove Alona from the house. She was, surrounded by her friends and also me, and her reaction of what she was saying was kind of kind of off footing, so to speak, because she kept saying, I killed my baby, and, crying, I killed my baby. We kind of try to like, wait a minute, we don't know exactly what happened yet. Let's kind of, wait until we find out exactly what happened. But of course, we try to console her to calm down. Yeah.
So that day, ultimately, did Grace come to stay with you after that?
Yes, because at the time, the kids went into CPS custody. And that's when Jennifer was kind of like, hey, who are they going to go to,
Stop right there. Who's Jennifer to you?
Jennifer's my fiance.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were seeing if we can try to get, Grace instead of putting her into a guardian's home, so to speak. So.
Since Grace has been living with you, so she's been living with you since this day in August.
Yes.
They were formally removed not till January, but she's been with you.
Yes.
Has Grace made statements to you about what happened to Alona?
Yes.
And in those instances, you don't have to see what she said, but can you just describe kind of the setting in which she made statements to you and then how you responded?
Okay. Actually, we were sitting around coloring and watching TV, and we were just kind of just having just a general conversation. And out of mid-conversation, she brought up what she saw or what happened in the house. So I just kind of paused, didn't ask her to repeat it. I was just kind of taken back. And during that time, I just kind of held to myself until I put her to bed, and then I called Jennifer and was like, hey, she basically kind of told me what she had spoken to you about and left it at that.
Okay. So at the time she said it to you, she had already made some statements to Jennifer. Do you remember approximately when the statements she made to you were?
It was actually a few weeks later after she's spoken to Jennifer and kind of said basically the same thing.
And you said you didn't ask her to repeat it, you just kind of let it alone?
Yes.
Why was that your reaction?
I felt because her being so young, I don't want to seem like I was kind of pushing her to say something that maybe dramatic. And I just felt if something like that she feels comfortable in saying it, I want to feel comfortable repeating it again if necessary, or get it off her chest to let me know, to make her feel better, so to speak. Because if that's something that's weighing on her mind to even say it, I don't want to feel like that I was forcing her to say something that I just didn't want it to come across like I was pushing her to talk what happened.
We kind of touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but how often would you help Dacia out with watching the kids or help her out with things that she would need?
That was one of the things that we discussed with her, and so Jennifer was like, anytime you need to have a break, you can always call us, we can help you out with the kids. Actually, Jennifer was doing more than what I had realized when it came to buying groceries and things like that. Because her whole entire life, I had tried to help her to the best of my ability, but at the same time, you're an adult, you should be able to take care of yourself also. But whenever she was really in a bind, because I actually got to the point I just stopped giving her any money, but then Jennifer, I find out later, was giving her things that I was worried about, because I feel that if you have people who keep offering and doing things for you, you're not going to want to do it for yourself, because it's easier than ask to do it. So, but when it comes to the kids, whenever she needed a break, we always came and got Grace, and Julius most of the time was with his dad on those certain occasions when we went to go get Grace.
I don't know anything very much. Thank you. Mr. Lacey, I first want to talk to you about your relationship with Grace.
Mm-hmm.
Grace is the grandchild that you're the closest to. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. And that was even before all this happened, you were closest to Grace.
Yes.
And Grace came home from the hospital to your house, right?
Yes.
And you were with Grace through infancy.
During the pregnancy, all the way until date of birth until now, yes.
Okay. And even when Dacia moved out of your house with Grace, you never still got Grace all the time.
Yes.
I do want to talk to you about that day you came to, I first want to talk to you about Alona, and you didn't meet Alona right away, is that correct?
I haven't met her, period.
You never met her. But you have plans to meet her that next weekend after this incident, is that right?
Yes, I have plans to actually meet her that upcoming weekend.
And so you and Dacia had scheduled that, is that right? Is that fair?
No, we have not scheduled that.
Okay, that's just something in your mind you were going to meet her that.
Yes.
But she had asked you at some point, why don't you come meet your granddaughter?
Exactly. Yes.
And then, before you're able to meet her, you get this phone call from Dacia.
Yes.
And as a result of that phone call, you come to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's yes.
Yes.
Okay. And that's the house that your family owns.
Yes.
Okay. And when you get there, you aren't able to get to Dacia right away.
No.
You are kind of waiting outside with friends and family for detectives and coroners to finish their investigation.
Exactly. Yes.
And when Dacia finally is able to come out of the house and be around you, she said in front of you and other friends and family, I killed my baby, I killed my baby.
Yes.
Okay. And so at that point, you knew in some way she felt responsible for the death of Alona.
That's the way I took it. Yes.
Okay. On that day, Grace didn't come home with you permanently on that day, is that correct?
No, it was later on that evening.
Okay. And so actually later on that evening, Jennifer went and picked her up. Is that
yes.
correct?
and she stayed with you guys that night.
Yes.
But eventually, she did go back into Dacia's care.
No.
She never went home after you picked her up that night.
No, at the time, well, I guess you're right, yes. Because it was a 6-month period before the arrest came, yes.
So she actually did go back home to mom for 6 months until she got arrested, is that correct?
Yes.
And then on the day that she got arrested, that's when Grace went into DCS custody.
Yes.
And that's when you and Jennifer took actual custody of Grace.
Correct, yes.
You talked a little bit at the end of your testimony about Dacia and kind of how you supported her for most of her life, is that correct?
Yes.
And you were supporting her by giving her money, giving her a place to live, those kind of things?
Yes.
And eventually you, as dad, said, like, that's enough, you need to stand on your own 2 feet.
Yes.
And unbeknownst to you, Jennifer is still helping her out financially.
Yes.
Okay. And though even when you stopped giving her money, you were still getting Grace and taking care of Grace?
Yes.
And although DCS didn't actually take the kids in that 6-month time period, you and Jennifer still had Grace a lot in that period.
Yes.
Still giving breaks to mom and things like that.
Whenever she needed, yes.
Okay. And that would include overnights and things like that?
Yes, for weekends, yes.
So entire weekends and everything?
Yes.
Nothing further, thank you, Jennifer.
Nothing on that page.
Sir, when Grace told you what she had seen, did you ask her any details after that?
No, sir.
I mean, for example, did you ask her to show you what she saw?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Well, you said that Dacia called you, and you took it as a joke. What was it about either her demeanor or what she said that made you feel that way?
She has said certain things before there was a serious matter, and it's like, I'm just joking. And so it wasn't uncommon to have a kind of, I wouldn't say a morbid joke, but a joke that was a serious matter and find out later it was just a joke. And that's the way I took it.
Okay. It was based on what specifically she said, but just based upon her general demeanor about other things?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. When you were surrounded with Dacia and her friends, did you recall her saying anything more or different than from "I told my baby"?
No, Your Honor. It was just more or less that she was kind of distraught and was kind of just saying that, and everyone around her was basically kind of like consoling her. It was like, well, we don't know if it was your fault, saying moments of prayer, try to make the little situation as calm as possible.
Okay. Questions on court, questions state?
Yes. David, what did Grace say to you? And I think it would come in as a prior consistent statement. Grace has testified.
You're gonna need to mumble louder.
I think it would come in as a prior consistent statement. Grace has testified. They had the opportunity to cross-examine and impeach her, and now the prior consistent statement came from him.
Defense, argument, response?
I think that, I'm sorry, I don't have to look at the rule based on, there has to be a recent application, and I don't think that has come up for the prior consistent statement.
However, we can answer.
Like I was mentioning earlier, we were sitting around coloring and watching TV and just having just a general conversation. And she was like, Papa, I seen my mommy take a pillow and put it over the baby's face to get her to stop crying. And that's basically the broad statement. I just kind of, like I said, taken back. And I was like, I know she just didn't say what I thought she just said. And like I said, at the time, I didn't want her to repeat it because it was just out of the blue that she said that comment. And then it got to the point where I think she felt comfortable in explaining what she saw, and she has mentioned it more than once to me, and it's never changed. It's always been that same situation that she was like, the baby was crying, mine was trying to get the baby to stop crying, and I seen her put the pillow over the baby's face to get her to stop crying.
And I do have one omitted question, if that's okay. Sir, do you remember what time Dacia called you that day?
You can take a second, okay?
So would you like to take a break? Take a break?
Get it back.
Some water? Get you a glass of water here.
Yes, please. Thank you.
You okay?
Yeah, yes, Your Honor.
Ready to answer some questions?
Yes.
Minutes. Terry.
Sir, I think the last thing I asked is what time did she call? Can you remember?
I know it was in the AM. I was at work at the time. The approximate time, it was before noon. I can tell you that much. I want to say it was around maybe between 9 and 10 a.m.
When you mentioned when the judge was asking you questions that when she came out and was talking to you and her other members, at that time you just felt like she was distraught.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry. At that time when she came out and she was talking to you and the other family members, she felt like she was distraught at that time.
Of course. Yes.
And you also made a statement to the judge concerning some jokes that sometimes Dacia says. Did she have like a morbid sense of humor or a weird affect around morbid things?
No, I would say it's not just the morbid joke. It was just more or less that she'll take like a serious situation for one incident, which I never find out it was a YouTube thing about I ran over somebody and I threw their body in the trunk. Could you help me hide the body? And it found out later it was a YouTube thing to see what your parents' reaction was going to be. Things like that.
She just does have some weird things.
Exactly.
Okay. Nothing else. Nothing further. Thank you.
Sure. I want to ask you one again. You were describing what it was that Grace told you.
Yes.
You said something about her explaining what she saw.
Yes.
And can you elaborate any further as to what she said besides the thing about taking the pillow and putting it over her face?
And she has mentioned after she said mommy put the pillow on the baby that she went back to sleep because she couldn't sleep. Dacia.
Dacia went back to sleep.
Yes, because she said that she couldn't sleep because the baby was crying.
Tell me that again.
Grace said that Dacia could not sleep because the baby was crying. That's why she put the pillow over the baby's face so she can go to sleep.
Okay. Did she tell you any more?
No.
Did she indicate whether the baby stopped crying at that point?
No.
Okay. Questions on the court's question state?
No.
Defense?
No.
Okay. May he be excused?
Yes. Steve will call Jennifer Armstrong next.
Could you reach your hand for me? You promise to tell the court to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under pain and penalty of perjury?
Yes.
All right, please have a seat. Once you're comfortable in your chair, can you please tell me who you are and how you spell your name?
Jennifer Armstrong. It's Jennifer. Armstrong, Armstrong.
State.
Thank you, Judge. You can move the microphone closer to you and help pick up your voice. Jennifer, how are you employed?
I work at Eskenazi.
And what do you do at Eskenazi?
I'm the manager of physician recruitment.
And
I'm a little hard of hearing. Do you mind
sorry.
getting the microphone a little closer to you?
I'm the manager of physician recruitment.
That's better. Thank you.
You're welcome.
who do you live with?
David Lacey and Grace Lacey.
How do you know David Lacey?
It's my fiance.
How long have you been with David?
2018.
Since 2018?
Maybe split up briefly, but yeah.
And you said you live with Grace Lacey.
Yes.
Is that David's granddaughter?
Yes.
Does David have a daughter?
Yes.
Who's David's daughter?
Dacia.
Do you know Dacia?
Yes.
When did you first meet David?
In 2018.
Can you tell us about the time you first met her?
The first time?
Yes.
It was actually our first date, and she called David, and it came. Sorry, it's really hard for me to look at this.
Okay.
Just water right in front of
Sorry.
you.
She called him as crying, and she was pregnant and said that the guy she was seeing, which is Grace's dad, had hit her and threw her outside. And she was obviously upset. I'm like, we're canceling everything. Obviously, we need to go get your daughter.
Okay, and so at that time, Dacia was pregnant with Grace?
Yes,
And at that point, did you start building a relationship with Dacia?
I did.
And what was your relationship like with her when she was pregnant?
We got really close. I mean, when she left his house that day, he gave her nothing, so I got her clothes, and we moved her into David's house. I had my own house still that time. I mean, that was our first date. So, I mean, I helped her. I've been recruiting for a long time, so I helped her get a job, a few jobs, whatever I could do to support her.
Fair to say you were fairly involved in her life when she was pregnant with Grace then?
Yes.
And then when Grace was born, what was your involvement like then?
I mean, I was in the delivery room with her, so we were very involved from the beginning.
And after Dacia had Grace, did you help her figure out a place to live other than with David?
Yeah, so at that point, David and I were engaged, and we were building a home. And David's mom had a rental that was open. People were living out. So we started working kind of simultaneously on getting the house together for her and the babe. David and I were kind of just buying everything new because we were building a new house, so we were just getting her, you know, kind of putting the best of each of our houses together to try to, you know, furnish her home and make it comfortable for her and the baby.
And was that a home that you were getting ready for her on the Burton Avenue?
Yes.
We've heard that Dacia has an older daughter before Grace. How often would you see that daughter?
I saw Lily 3 or 4 times at the beginning of David and I.
Did Lele live with her dad?
Yes, she was with her dad.
So you didn't have a close connection with that child?
No, I mean, I didn't have access, so I got to see her when David or Dacia would get her.
And so you're getting the house together. Is Dacia working? You said you tried to get her a couple of jobs.
So a good friend and colleague of mine was working staffing agency at the time. So she worked for one place. They had multiple contracts. So I would say probably 4 or 5, maybe guesstimating places that she had worked.
And did any of them become long-term?
No.
So what was Dacia doing for money?
So she, I mean, the house was paid for, so she was obviously, I mean, that wasn't just supposed to be paying rent. It was her grandmother, so she got some forgiveness there. I mean, she really, I think, just had utilities. I would help with food, or she needed money, I would sneak it to her.
What do you mean sneak it to her?
Because her dad kind of forbid me from sending her money, so I would try to either just get what she needed, or some groceries, or give her cash, because I didn't want her to struggle.
Why did your fiance forbid you to give Dacia any more money?
We just had David and I had very different experiences with, I have 2 grown daughters. So for me, it was just a given that I'm going to jump in and help your daughter, right? Like, that's just duh. Like, that's what you do. Your daughter needs help. For him, I think he had been burnt throughout the years. And I told him, he warned me, he's like, you're going to get burnt, I'm telling you. And I said, well, then she's just going to have to burn me. You know, if that happens, then at least I know, but I have to at least try to give her resources and help her as much as I can.
How often would you take Grace to give her away once Grace was born?
I had Grace quite a bit. I mean, so the first, probably leading up to COVID, that first year, she came home with us from the hospital, so she was home with us at the beginning for a while. It would be off and on. You know, as Dacia needed a break, I would take her. I travel some for work, so, you know, when I was unavailable, I would always keep Grace as much as possible to give her a break.
And was that kind of, you know, an unspoken thing, like, give me a call anytime you need me for Grace?
Yeah, I mean, she knew I was there.
At some point, Dacia becomes pregnant with Julius Jr.
Yes.
How did you find out about Julius' pregnancy?
So we would still see Dacia throughout that pregnancy. We didn't know that she was pregnant. I don't know how, but like after she had Grace, she really just didn't change much physically. So it wasn't super apparent that she was pregnant to me. And I think with Julius, I think David told me maybe like a week before, 2 weeks before he was born, she was about to have another baby. And I'm like, what? Like, it hasn't been that long. Like, are you about to have a baby? We wouldn't even know. I've seen you, but we were not. I think she probably knew that, you know, with all help and trying to help her get on her feet, that we wouldn't be ecstatic about it. So
after Julius was born, did you continue to help out and get Grace?
Yeah. So getting Grace never stopped. We didn't get Julius much. It seemed like whenever we would pick her up or drop her off, I mean, Dave would pick up and drop off a lot because his work is close, so it was easy. We're in Zionsville, so like going downtown, he would just grab her if I wasn't at the hospital. To me, he didn't seem like he was there very much, but I think he was also with his dad. And then there was a short time that I know, like after he was born, Dacia told me she was staying, you know, kind of in between both houses too. Okay. So he just wasn't there. We didn't have access. I mean, we didn't see him a lot.
Julius Jr. was just often with Julius Sr., and though when you would get Grace, it was mostly just Grace.
Yeah. Yes.
Moving on, at some point, did you learn about Dacia being pregnant with Alona?
Yeah. So I learned that probably a week before everything happened. I was actually in Florida, and at that time, David and I had separated, and I was still getting Grace. He was still prep Grace and bring her to me. We were still waiting like a mile away from each other. And I was in Florida at a conference, and David called me, and he was like, oh yeah, by the way, we have another one. And I'm like, what?
This is after Alona's born.
Yes. So this was like the week before everything happened, maybe a week or two?
The week before Alona
Passed away, yes. And then the day I landed coming back home from my conference is the day everything happened.
Okay. So August 29th, 2022 is the day that Alona passed away. When do you find out about that?
That she died?
Yes.
So David called me from Dacia's house. Like I just landed at the airport. I just gotten home.
Prior to that, had Dacia been reaching out, needing your help or anything like that?
Not as much like that, but probably because she didn't want to tell me about Alona, I'm assuming. I mean, within that few weeks, not much.
Okay. And so you get a call from David. Do you then talk to Dacia?
No, like it was in the middle of, I think, all the kind of chaos.
Okay.
He said everybody was there and it was chaotic, and I had just landed, so I said, where are the kids? He said that Julius, I can't remember, somebody had already taken Julius, or was on their way to get Julius, and maybe even Dacia's mom. So I just tried to get out of the airport, please, so I could get Grace.
Okay. And did you go get Grace?
I did.
And what do you do with Grace?
I took her home with me.
And then the next day, do you talk with Dacia?
Yes.
And tell me about that conversation.
And I may have talked to her that night, because I think I called her and let her know I didn't grab Grace. I'm on my way later, but I mean, obviously everything was so chaotic, so I think I just was like, I'm sorry, I love you, I'll call you tomorrow and grab Grace so you can deal with everything. And then we spent the next day. And of course, I'm like, what the heck happened? Like, first of all, I didn't know about her. I'm just trying to digest. This is a whole lot, right? I'm trying to digest. And she said they think it's SIDS. And I'm like, SIDS? Like, what the heck? And I'm like, where were the kids? I'm trying to put the pieces together, right? Because David didn't really know a whole lot at that point either. And then she had mentioned propping the bottle up and Alana's mouth. And I'm like, Dacia, what? And she's like, what? She's like, you've done it with Grace. And I'm like, if I'm sitting right next to her working, you can't prop a bottle up in a newborn's mouth and leave. And she's like, I was just really tired. I went and laid down for a little while. And I'm like, Dacia, like this baby probably drowned. She's probably, they do is she's probably gonna have milk in her wings. You can't do that with a newborn baby. You can't put a bottle in her mouth and just the pet.
What was Dacia's reaction when you told her that?
She was, I think it clicked, oh no. Could be a possibility. And she didn't want me to put bad mojo out there. And I said, it's not bad mojo, honey. I want you to be prepared that this is, like, they could find this in her autopsy. If you propped a bottle up and went to bed, she could have drowned. She could have fluid, milk in her lungs. I want you to be prepared on what could happen. That's a possibility.
Did you talk to Dacia about drug use?
Yes, I think David may have mentioned this is all kind of a blur on times. So somewhere in this too, David had mentioned that they had given her a test, and I told her, I'm like, you just need to tell the truth. Tell me the truth. Did you do drugs? They did a drug test. We're gonna know. And she made that she done meth. I didn't ask like a timeline at this point. This was just way too much. And I was like, I need to take care of Grace and digest some of this a lot.
So moving forward a little bit to September 1st, 2022, do you remember that day?
Yes.
And who was at your house that day?
So that morning it was just Grace and I let work know I obviously needed to be working remotely for a little while until I could figure out what was going on. So I turned on cartoons for Grace, and she was sitting next to me on the couch while I was working. And then my daughter came home. So both of my daughters are really close to Grace. So my oldest daughter came home to check on Grace, because obviously I filled her in on what was happening.
And when your oldest daughter came over, did Grace say something to you that caught you off guard?
Yes.
What did she say?
All right, overrule your objection, she can answer.
So I'm a recruiter, so I have my phone in my hand all the time. So I was texting one of my candidates to push back an interview that I had coming up, and Peyton had come in, and she ran across the room. She's like, hi, Gracie, baby, and jumps on her, and she's giving a hug. And I hadn't talked to Grace about anything because I just honestly was trying to digest it myself, and I didn't know what she saw, what had happened, anything. So it really caught me off guard. She looked at Peyton, but it was like, I just wanted Peyton to know what she knew. I knew, I think, because I picked her up, but it was like she wanted to make sure we knew what was happening. And she said, Pei, my baby's sister died. And Peyton said, I know, honey, I'm so sorry. That's why I came home to check on you. And she said, yeah, my mommy got really mad at her. She wouldn't stop crying. And she held a pillow on her face and hit her with it. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what did you just say, Grace? And so I hit record on my phone. I don't know why I did that, but I did. I think I just had it in my hand, and I'm like, I did. And I'm like, tell me that again. What did you just say? And she said it again.
And then what she said again, you had that on video?
Yes.
After she said that, what did you do?
Well, obviously my heart in my stomach. So I immediately told Peyton to watch Grace, and I went to the garage and called David.
After talking with David, did you decide that you were going to let the authorities know about what Grace just said?
Yes.
And did you reach out to CS?
I did.
And then did you speak with Detective Hadley?
Yes.
Did you provide that video to them?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State Exhibit 4. Do you recognize this disc?
Yes.
And does this disc contain that video that you took of Grace on September 1st, 2022?
Yes.
The state would move to minute stage 4.
Because they would inject it for us, that you're saying.
I'm sorry, you object for,
That's hearsay.
as hearsay?
Yeah.
Okay. Ma'am, prior to Grace saying what she says on 4, had you or any adult in Grace's presence suggested anything to her, asked her about what happened that day?
I didn't, because this was just the night before, and so like it was only me, so I just took her straight home. David and I weren't even living together at the time, so it was just her and I. And by the time I got her, it was getting late, so like I put her down, gave her a bath, and we went straight to bed. And then this was the next day.
Okay. Was there any, can you give me any there's a video here. So my assumption is the video, what I'm seeing is something that you did after she said it the first time.
I just asked her to repeat herself.
Okay.
And got it on video.
All right. Did you say anything else to her? Other than to ask her to repeat herself?
I think, well, she had said something specific the first time around, like about the video, and I was like, tell me again what happened with the pillow? I think it was something like that. And that's when she
Okay.
was,
Did you tell her in any way that what she was saying was right, wrong, good, bad, anything like that?
no, I didn't say anything. I mean, I think I was in shock. I just was like, what? And then went and immediately called David.
All right. We would ask her to say whatever she says on the video. And what you say to her also on the video?
I think so, yeah.
Any questions on the court's questions for the exhibit itself? State?
Judge.
Defense?
Not on the exhibit, Judge.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, not on the exhibit.
All right. I'll show state's forward and then it over to objection.
Permission to publish.
You may.
One moment.
Judge, I'm going to be, I don't mean to be rude, but here, Judge,
Yeah, I'm
where
listening.
are we staying on this?
She's in the video.
Either party have any, the question that Edie is asking is 2.17, the rules of judicial conduct prohibit the showing of victim's testimony and of testimony of the juvenile. Technically, it's not testimony, but it is the child. My inclination is,
I would object to it being.
okay, my inclination is not to put it on the air.
Yes.
And I would agree with that.
Again, the rules here are somewhat vague, and the more we do broadcast with the media, I think we learn to do refinements. But I think in terms of the spirit of it, I think it's probably wouldn't be. So I also indicated at this point that court is, just so the record is clear, the court is allowing this testimony in as an excited utterance, even though court recognizes it is delayed from the immediate observance. I think under case law, in terms of excited utterance, it doesn't have to be within a set period of time, and particularly since volunteered by a 3-year-old. The court finds the statement does have an issue of reliability, such to include it in the record. I will show that over the defense objection. You may play.
Did you continue to see Dacia?
I did.
What was your understanding of what's going on at that time
From which angle?
for the investigation after talking to the detective?
So, I mean, they basically informed me that this is a process. It's going to take time, to get autopsies back and to do their investigation. So we knew, there would be some time. I think that's how David and I looked at this was, hopefully just something comes back and everything's going to be fine and, nothing's going to come back on the autopsy and, everything will be good.
Okay, so you learned that after you gave that information, it was still under investigation, it was going to take some time.
Yes.
Did you tell Dacia about what Grace said?
No.
Why?
Because I wanted to get Grace as much as possible, not knowing, Grace was 3, so not knowing exactly, there were a lot of different stories being told, there were just a lot of stuff wasn't adding up, and I wanted to make sure, I knew that if she knew any of this, that we would not be able to get Grace, and at that time, I knew that Julius was okay because he was with his dad all the time and with Dacia's mom at that point a lot. Her mom and I were communicating, she was keeping Julius a lot, I was keeping Grace a lot, and I think at that point, just their safety, and we wanted to make sure the kids were safe until this was figured out.
So fair to say you didn't want to interfere with the investigation and let Dave know about what Grace said?
Correct. I mean, there were several reasons. It just makes sense not to and let things play out and keep the kids as much as possible.
At some point, was Dacia arrested, and then the DCS formally kind of allowed you to have Grace all the time?
Yes.
And are you in the process of adopting Grace?
Yes.
And throughout the time since that day on September 1st, have you been asking Grace any questions about what happened to her baby sister?
I don't have to. She will tell you. No, so David and I, we had talked about this a while back. We had a psychiatrist through CPS see Grace at the very beginning because, of course, her long-term well-being is the concern. And how do we handle this? What's the best way to handle this? And she basically said, listen, if she wants to talk, give her a safe space to do that. And that's if she brings something up, I give her that safe space. But I don't want her to remember this long-term. So we do not. It's not our dinner discussion.
You said that she'll just tell you. You don't have to ask.
Yes.
What are some times when Grace told you?
Before I go on that, you said Grace brings this up?
Yes.
Same subject matter?
Yes. And it does not change.
I'm sorry.
It does not waver. It's the same to me when we discuss.
Court overruled objection. You may answer.
So, that's the reason there's not a lot. I say that because she said the same thing so many times. There's nothing to, I just say, I'm sorry, honey, that's bothering you today, or, we're going to say prayers for Alona tonight when we pray, or I just say something to give her that comfort and that safe space, but she says the same thing. So it's not anything that's oh my gosh, there's new info.
I'm going to direct your attention. Do you remember being at McDonald's once when Grace did something?
Yes. So I was taking her to get her hair done. We stopped at McDonald's on the way, and an ambulance went in front of the McDonald's, and she said, "Hey, Mimi, what that is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's an ambulance." And I'm like, "Hey, lady, kind of half paying attention." She's like, "There was an ambulance at my mom's house when she killed my baby sister." I was like, "Sorry, what do you say, right?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, honey."
Tell me that again.
She said there was an ambulance that one time at my mommy's house when she killed my baby sister.
When she killed
My baby sister.
That's her exact language?
Yes. And when those things happen, I just divert it. I'm like, "You want some ketchup?" I just try to change the topic.
I have no further questions.
Get across?
Thank you. And then the last thing you just said that when Grace was 3 or 4 years old, she stated that her mom killed her baby sister.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about the video that we saw. The judge asked you some questions before we saw the video about, did you talk to her about anything that happened the day before, right? But you weren't with her the entire time before hearing that. Is that correct? So let me ask a better question.
Okay.
Because that was a confusing question. Grace initially went with her dad's family, correct?
Yes.
And so right after the incident, you did not have her.
No.
Okay. And so she was with her dad's family for almost a whole day. Is that fair to say?
No, I think she went over there that evening. I don't know because I was in Florida, so I was catching all this as I'm trying to travel.
So
but I got her the next morning.
She was around other adults for some period of time, though.
I don't know if she was around. I wasn't there. I'm assuming an adult was with her.
You would hope she was
Yeah.
around other adults. And you also know she was around police officers and things like that before she got to you. Correct?
Yes. I'm assuming so. I wasn't there.
I want to talk to you about your relationship with Dacia outside of Grace. I know they're kind of intertwined for you, right? Because you met her when she was pregnant with Grace. But when you first met Dacia, you kind of became a mom figure right away for her. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And you helped her get set up after her boyfriend kicked her out, right?
Yes.
You tried to get her jobs. Is that correct?
Yes.
And after she had Grace, you continued to help her financially,
Yes.
right? And even though David warned you don't do that, you still continue to do that.
Yes.
So you were very close to Dacia.
Yes.
And then to kind of piggyback on that, you were close to Grace when she was born as well, correct?
Yes.
You took Dacia to all her prenatal appointments, correct?
Not all of them, but
A lot of them?
Yes.
You pick her up and drop her off when she needed things,
correct.
right?
Yes.
And you were even in the delivery room when Grace was born.
I cut her umbilical cord.
And you got her umbilical cord. So that's pretty close,
Very.
starting out from the beginning. And then she actually went home with you and David, right?
So Dan and I were living separately. Or no, when she had Grace, we were, yes.
So she was from minute one, she was with you. Fair to say? Okay. And then even when Dacia kind of moved out into your grandma's house, you're still getting Grace all the time, right?
Yes.
And you're Mimi too,
I
right?
am.
She called you Mimi?
Yes.
Okay. And so this never wavered throughout having Juliet and having Alona. You were still always very close to Grace.
Correct.
And in fact, Grace was your main concern when you found out all of this happened.
Yes.
She was your number one priority.
She still is.
Still is your number one priority.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about that night, and you said you can't remember if it was the same night or the day after that you talked to Dacia about what happened, okay?
Okay.
She told you some things. First of all, she told you that they were thinking that this was Sid's at first, right? She also told you that she propped a baby bottle up in the baby's mouth, correct?
Yes.
With a pillow?
Yes.
Okay. And you were kind of aghast at that because you're like, you can't do that.
Yes.
And to her, she was floored that that's not something you do.
Yes.
So she didn't know that you shouldn't be beating a baby bottle up in an infant's mouth. Fair to say?
Well, she had seen me do it, but I didn't leave the baby.
Right.
So
So she had mistakenly thought, this is okay because I saw.
I don't know what thought. I informed her that was not a smart decision.
So she acted like she didn't know that wasn't a smart decision at the time.
Yes.
Okay. I also want to talk to you a little bit about, you said that she admitted to you using meth that day, right?
Yes.
And you actually spoke to Detective Hadley right after this happened. Do you remember that? And it
Yes.
was a recorded interview?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember telling Detective Hadley that she told you that she had done ecstasy?
So I think it was like meth and ecstasy, and those two drugs were interchangeable throughout some of these weeks. Because when David and I would chit chat, he's like, "Wait, what is it?" Because we don't actively have access to those things. So like both of those drugs were. So I don't know exactly which one.
But you do recall giving Detective Hadley a statement?
Yes.
And Judge Manford? Sure. Thank you. And I'm going to show you a copy of your statement. Page 10. Thank you.
And right here it says Speaker Jennifer Armstrong. It says, so that point tonight she told me that she had done ecstasy on Sunday.
Okay.
Is that correct? Did I read that right?
Yes.
And that's the day of this incident?
Yes. Or I don't know what day it was. It just said if I said Sunday, I don't know what the day was. Was it Monday or Sunday?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Okay. I don't know. I don't have the calendar, so I don't know the dates in front of me. She just said Sunday, so is what my transcript says. But I don't. It was almost 2 years
Do you
ago.
remember saying that she used the drug on Sunday?
Yes.
Not that she used it on that morning that the baby died?
Yes, she just said that Sunday.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, Judge. Oh, but it's okay if I don't. I'm sorry. Okay. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about what happened after this incident with Grace. And we talked about you still got Grace after this incident happened, but she was still in Dacia's care. Is that right?
At which point in time?
Between August and January. Between the time.
Legally, yes.
Legally,
I still had her most of that time because at the very beginning of this, like obviously I was trying to let her deal with everything that was happening. So I still had Grace a lot of that first 6 months.
You were still getting her as you would have normally.
No more.
More. Okay. But she was still technically living with Dacia. She had not been removed from Dacia's care.
Legally, she had not been removed from Dacia's care.
And then after that detective interview in January, you found out that both she and Julius had been removed from Dacia's care. Is that right?
Correct.
And you immediately wanted to make sure that Grace was with you.
Correct.
And Grace, in fact, has been placed with you. Is that correct?
Correct.
And she lives with you now.
Yes.
And she calls you her new mommy. Is that right?
She intertwines.
Intertwines Mimi and new mommy.
Mhm.
And I think you had mentioned earlier that you guys are now in the process of adopting Grace. Is that correct?
Correct.
And one last question. To your knowledge, has Grace talked about this with any other family members, including David?
Yes.
Nothing for the judge to do.
Okay.
No further questions.
Okay, I'll ask.
Okay.
Who else did you talk to?
So, do you want me to tell you stories too?
No, I don't want the story.
Okay, my
I just wanna
sister.
know.
She told
And
me-
my assumption is, again, the same kind of comments that she said to you about this incident.
Very similar. So she's told my sister, both my daughters, my mom. She obviously Grace doesn't understand the magnitude of this, so it's no different than her telling you that she had peanut butter and jelly, for lunch yesterday. It's just very matter of fact, like this is what it is. And I'm like, no, we don't have to tell everybody, Grace. Like, she's very matter of fact with it. I would say most of our family at some point she's made
She's
comments
more
to.
matter of fact that, if there's a distinction, you tell me whether that's fair or not. Is she more matter of fact that mommy killed the baby or that mommy used pillow?
That she killed the baby. That's why she doesn't
I'm
have
sorry?
it. That she killed the baby. That's why she doesn't have. That's
Okay, she says that more than she does the method in terms of using the pillow.
She does, and I think a lot of it too being in school. She's got these peers that have siblings, and so my niece just has a daughter, and it's she's gonna have a little sister. Well, I used to. It's those types of references that trigger that. It's usually triggered by something like seeing the ambulance or word.
Okay. Questions on the court? Questions, Shane?
No, Judge.
Defense?
Thank you, Judge. Do you know that she told anyone outside of your family what happened?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess I'm going to ask you because I'm just going to ask you anyway. Who is that?
So she goes to a private Christian school, and they have chapel every morning. And so at parent-teacher conferences recently, her teacher told me that every morning when the pastor comes in to do their morning chapel before school, that Grace asks everybody to pray for her baby sister that's in heaven, because of the same comment after.
And I just want to be clear, she's using the word killed.
Yes.
Nothing further, sorry. No questions?
Okay. You should be excused.
Yes.
You can call your dad today.
Judge, we all made it here.
I assume it was a great day to pave. Ron Rubber, State of Indiana versus Dacia Lacey under 4932-2301F1002213. Defendant's present person by counsel, state by deputy prosecutors. We're in second day of bench trial. We adjourned for the evening last night. We were still on the state's case. The chief, state, you have additional evidence you wish the board to consider?
Yes.
Let me call your next.
State will call Detective Jamie Davis.
I'm sworn to about now the court will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under pain and penalty of perjury.
I do.
Please have a seat. Once you're comfortable, can you tell me who you are and how you spell your name for our record?
Detective Jamie Davis, Jamie Davis.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Davis, let's just clarify, when this case happened, were you Detective Hadley?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you have since changed your name?
Yes.
Okay. How are you employed?
I am a child abuse detective with Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department.
How long have you been with IMPD?
I've been with IMPD since June of 2014.
And what kind of training did you go through to be an IMPD officer?
I've gone through, so I started off as a gaming agent, so I went through ILEA's Game Commission Academy back in 2007, and then I transferred to Shelbyville Police Department, went through ILEA's Basic Academy back in 2009, and then from there, I transferred from Shelbyville to here, and then went through lateral Indianapolis Academy for IMP, and that was in 2014.
And prior to, so from 2014 to when you became a child abuse detective, were you just a patrol officer at that point?
Yes, ma'am.
And what area did you work?
I started off at East District, and then I moved downtown before coming into the child abuse unit.
Okay. Did you do any specific training when you came to the child abuse unit?
Yes, I went through a training period with a detective training officer. That's generally 40 days, and then you're on probation, I believe it's a year from the day you go into the unit.
Have you done any specific schools or training as a part of your detective training as well?
I have. I've gone through the Homicide and Major Crime School in 2022, and then I also have gone through, back in 2007, I went through a Reed School of Interrogation and Interviewing as part of the Gaming Commission's Academy, and then I've also gone through the Stan Walters Interrogation and Interviewing School in 2023. I went through Child First, which is for forensic interviewers, in 2023, and then I also went through Child Homicides and Death Investigation School at Franklin PD in 2023.
I'm going to draw your attention to Monday, August 29th of 2022. Were you working in your capacity as a child abuse detective on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you on call on that day?
I honestly don't remember if I was on call. When you're in DT, we call it DTO, when you're in detective training, even if runs come out as if you were on call, you would typically take it.
Okay. Did you respond to a child fatality on that day at Burton Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
How were you notified of that case?
Street officer, I was working Officer Harvey, requested a child abuse detective call.
Okay. And did you respond to the scene at that time?
Not at that time. I called the detective first and then gathered information. Another officer or another detective in the unit applied for a search warrant of the residence, which was granted, and I headed to the residence at that time.
Okay. When you got to the house, who did you speak with?
I spoke with the officer again when I got to the house, and then I went in and introduced myself to Dacia.
Can you describe her demeanor in your first interaction with her?
Initially, she was very quiet. She said I went in to introduce myself, and she just started talking about how she thought she knew what happened. And I went ahead and turned on my recording and, broke things down and introduced myself, got all of her information, all of the children's information, then had her start going through what she was meaning when I first walked in. I just know it was just real quiet and soft. I didn't really think too much at first about it. It was more the odd statement of her kids. She thought her kids did something.
Okay. And at some point, you had a training officer with you. Was that Detective Hope?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point, did he tell you, hey, wait for everybody to get here?
Yes, he did.
Okay. So you didn't get kind of a full statement then?
No, ma'am.
You waited for the coroners and whatnot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was this your first death investigation that you were lead on?
Yes, ma'am.
Had you been out on other death investigations?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you said her demeanor was quiet. That initial kind of encounter with a parent, how much stock do you put into that demeanor?
I really don't put a lot of stock initially in anyone's emotions during any of these types of investigations. Part of the homicide major schools was trauma training, trauma informed, and everybody experiences trauma differently. So it's just something that, I mean, you just know, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Okay. What kind of did you do after you kind of introduced yourself to Dacia and explained the process? How did things kind of unfold going forward?
So I stepped out, waited for the coroners to get there, and then once everybody arrived, coroners, DCS, we went ahead and took a statement from Dacia. It was led by the coroner. That, again, I recorded. During that statement, our crime lab had also arrived, and I stepped away for a minute, gave my recorder to Detective Hope so that he could stay present and I wouldn't miss anything and go back listen. And I kind of walked them through what I wanted done at the residence.
Okay. And we'll get back to the walkthrough in a minute, but you said the initial kind of statement there was led by the coroner. Was he going through that study form that we've kind of talked about a lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that's directing his questioning and the process that you go through on the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you said you directed crime lab. What did you want crime lab to do in this case?
Dacia had mentioned a couple of different things on how she had found Alona. She had mentioned a blanket being over Alona at one point. She had mentioned pillows being over Alona at one point. Wasn't sure if either one was going to be relevant or not, so I just asked crime lab to collect those. I asked crime lab to take video, of course, of the entire residence and to take photographs.
And it was a fairly small residence, so was it, there were pretty much kids up everywhere?
Yeah.
Okay. And at that point, again, you weren't sure what was running, so you wanted everything?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was anything else really happening that day besides that basic scene investigation that we've talked so much about?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Going forward, kind of what started happening in your investigation?
So the next day, myself and DCS attended the autopsy of Alona. It had been scheduled for 10:30. They were running a little behind, and unfortunately I had another, appointment outside of this case that I had to leave the autopsy early, but I know DCS stayed for the whole thing. And then the following day, I believe it was the 31st.
You need to refer to your notes at any point. You can just let us know that's what you're doing.
Okay.
You can refresh your memory.
The 31st, I received paperwork from DCS. They're called 310s and 311s. It's basically the reports that DCS has. And then after that, I believe it's September 1st, and I'll just double check it fast. Yes. September 1st, I was notified that all of the photos that Crime Lab had taken were uploaded to the system, and then later that day I had received another email from a DCS worker stating that Alona's sister, Grace, I'm not sure which to call her, but she had made a statement that was concerning.
Okay. So when you got notified about Grace's statement, what did you kind of do next as a result of that notification?
So according to the FCM that had emailed me, Natalie Scheffler, Jen Armstrong was involved in informing her of this. So I notified Jen and asked her to come into my office that day if she could, so that I can find out from her what was going on and what was said. Okay.
Were you able to interview Jennifer Armstrong that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And then were you able to see the video that she had taken of her?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the video that we watched you for yesterday?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After interviewing Jennifer, then did you schedule a forensic interview for Grace?
Yes, a forensic interview was scheduled. I believe it ended up being scheduled for September 7th.
And why do you schedule a forensic interview of Grace?
So it's important when you're getting statements from children to make sure that that child's best interest is in place, and they're trained child forensic interviewers that will do just that. So it creates a safe environment for them to feel free to talk about whatever they want to talk about, and to give them that kind of space, be able to feel open enough to disclose any information that they might have.
And at that point, you had not gone through the 40-hour training that a forensic interviewer does, but you since have. Is that correct?
Correct.
And forensic interviews are a pretty big part of what you do. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And you've watched plenty of forensic interviews?
Yes.
Are they meant to be non-leading in fashion?
Yes.
Do children always disclose in an interview, even if they disclosed previously? Okay. After that interview, did Grace make any disclosure about what happened with Alona in her interview?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you receive any other information from DCS going forward about Dacia's case?
Yes. At some point,
Oh, you're fine. What was that?
at some point, I had requested from DCS FCM Kirsten Bryant any notes that she may have had, and I knew that they had taken an initial drug screen on scene that day. I asked her if she ever had the results of those, and I was able to obtain those as well.
Okay. And we kind of already heard about that, but Dacia did test positive for methamphetamine and amphetamine that day, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So at this point, you have not done a formal interview of Dacia Lacey or an interrogation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But as the investigation has evolved, you've gotten some other pieces of information that
Yes.
you were wanting to confront her. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there a final piece of information that you kind of need to have before you formally interrogated her?
The autopsy report.
And why was it important to you to kind of have all that information prior to bringing her in?
I wanted to know as much as possible before bringing her in. It kind of helps me determine how to address all of the inconsistencies throughout the investigation and how to move forward.
Okay. Did you finally receive the autopsy report?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you discuss the findings with the pathologist prior, like after you got the report, just to kind of clarify some things for yourself?
I know I talked to her after the statement from Grace.
Okay.
And I was asking her questions regarding rigor mortis and hyper mortis, and she sent me some information on it to help me understand how all of that works. And then I also, if you don't mind, I'd like to refer to my notes.
You may.
Oh, yes, sorry. I also asked her about smothering, if there's any signs and things of that nature, what to look for, if there's anything that she would be able to tell from an autopsy regarding that.
Okay. Before we get to Dacia's interview, I do want to just go through a couple things from the scene and the places that you were specifically looking at. So I'm going to bring approach the witness and defense has already looked through these this morning. I'm going to show you what's been marked for purposes of identification as 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Do you recognize those? So you can look through all of them. Take your time.
Yes, ma'am.
And are those photos true and accurate from your scene investigation at the Burton Avenue address, this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, I would move 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 in evidence.
No objection. We should have stayed 7 through, including 10, 12 through, including 16, admitted without objection.
And I'm going to just show them on the... All right, Detective Lewis, State's Exhibit 7 is just the outside of the house that you're responding to, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. State's Exhibit 8, this is the swing that was in the front room, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And why was that relevant to you? Was that a part of some of her initial discussion of what happened that night?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Okay. And then State's Exhibit 9, is that how everything was when you got there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there on the couch is Alona covered up with a blanket. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then State's Exhibit 10 is Alona on scene that day. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In State's Exhibit 12, this is that couch, but just the couch after she was removed.
Correct.
And is that from, so after Alona was taken away, would that have been like when you guys were doing the reenactment and whatnot?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Now State's Exhibit 13 and 13, 15, and 16, is this the bedroom where Dacia and the baby were supposed to be sleeping?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there's an adult bed and there's a pack and play, but I think Kirsten Bryan already described that it was full of items. And Stage 15 is just another view of that, is that correct?
Correct.
Same room. And Stage 16 is more focused on the pack and play, is that correct?
It is, yes.
And then Stage 14 is that the children's room where the other 2 minor children were sleeping?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and why, obviously the area where Alona was is relevant. Why are the bedrooms and the sleeping arrangements relevant to your investigation?
It shows us a layout of the residence and the house and how everything was, and it could be relevant depending on the statements that were given during the investigation.
Okay. And so the swing that we saw, that would not be considered a safe place for an infant to sleep?
Correct.
And the couch that we saw would not be considered a safe place for the infant to sleep?
Correct.
And obviously pack and play that was full of things would not be a safe place for the infant to sleep?
That's correct.
And it was also not safe for an infant to be sleeping in bed with the mother?
Mumbling.
What?
You're mumbling.
Sorry. The bed that the mother was sleeping in would also not be a safe place for the infant, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So that was your scene investigation, and then that's where you've gotten this other information. Do you finally bring Dacia in for an interview once you got the autopsy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was she advised of her rights prior to giving you an interview?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. I'm going to show you what's been marked for purposes of identification as State's Exhibit 17. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 17?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
It's the advice of rights form that we go through with anybody that we bring in who's a potential suspect.
And do you go through that in the written form and verbally with her?
Yes, ma'am.
And did she state she understood and signed that and agreed to speak with you?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, I would States 17 and 2 evidence.
No objection.
Show 17 admitted without objection.
Now I'm also going to show you States 18. Do you recognize this recording?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you recognize it?
It's the audio or video recording of the statement during the interview that I took on the follow-up interview. Apologize.
Okay. And that's the video recorded interview on January 18th of 2023?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have you reviewed that disc prior to today?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a accurate representation of your interview data on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, I move states 18 into evidence.
So 18 admitted without objection.
And by agreement of the parties, the court is going to watch that at a later time. So I will just move.
This is a 3-hour tape?
Yes.
Okay.
I will just move on. Ultimately, at the end of that interview, well, Dacia made statements to you about a different version of events. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what specifically did she tell you happened ultimately?
Ultimately,
At the end of it, she did tell you a couple versions in that interview. Is that fair?
Yes.
What is the final version that she told you?
the final version was that basically she was high on what she took that she believed was called, it was a rolling pill. That's how I was referred to it, but she believed it was Molly.
And what is Molly?
Oh, I apologize. Molly is a drug that kind of gives you, it's an upper in a sense, but it kind of gives you this relaxed, like everybody knows it as a love drug or something along that line. That's the best way I can describe it. But it's an illegal substance that individuals take to relax.
Okay.
And
would it be consistent with like MDMA or ecstasy?
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
sorry.
That's
Yes.
okay. So she told you she was high and what?
So basically she said that she was high and she was tired and Alona had been crying, and ultimately she ended up picking up Alona and facing her towards the crease in the couch. So if you have the back of the couch and then the seating area, she placed her right here face towards the crease.
And once she kind of made those statements to you, did you arrest her at that time?
I spoke with a prosecutor about everything, and then yes, ultimately I arrested her.
Okay. So after her interview that day, did you get any additional search warrants as a part of your investigation?
I did. She had a couple of phones on her. I do not believe either of these were the phones that she had at my initial investigation back in 2022. However, we still collected those, applied for a search warrant, searched those phones, and tried to find any information that we could relevant to the investigation.
So you got a digital forensics return
Yes, ma'am.
on the phone, her phone data, but none of that was directly pertinent to your investigation.
Correct.
And at this point, a period of about 4 or 5 months had passed, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I can just have 1 second, Judge. During Dacia's statement, she was, you were consoling her, is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And she was crying.
Yes, ma'am.
She was making statements to you as you were kind of comforting to her.
Yes, ma'am.
Are any of those statements things that you heard that are hard to hear on the video?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me about those?
Yes, ma'am. She was actually sitting on my lap and crying on my shoulder and had said that she did her baby wrong and said that she smothered her baby. I can refer to my PC for the exact statement. But
Okay. Go ahead.
she said that she just needed sleep and that she smothered her baby and she should have never did Alona that way. She should have never turned Alona around.
Have any other questions at this time?
And I assume you're reserving the right to have additional questions after the court reviews 18.
Yes.
The defense wish to cross as to this part of the witness's testimony.
Yes.
You may.
Detective, you have been in the child abuse unit since July 2022,
Yes, sir.
and this came towards the end of August of 2022.
Yes, sir.
And at that time, you were still supervised by a training officer, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the officer was with you on scene that day. That day, 8/29/22.
Yes, he was on scene with me. I apologize.
And this was your first child death investigation, is that correct?
As lead detective, yes.
Well, you were not lead detective before as far as the child abuse unit, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this would have been your first case as lead detective in the child.
Yes.
Okay. Were you lead detective in any other type of investigation other than children death investigation before?
Other than, I'm sorry.
Child death investigation.
Yes, sir.
And that would have been in crimes not related to children at all.
No, sir.
Okay. Then what were you investigating before?
All I investigate as a child abuse detective is crimes against children. So we investigate physical abuse, we investigate sexual abuse, and we investigate death investigations of children, and we also investigate neglect cases such as overdoses or unsafe living conditions, things of that nature.
So between July, when you started in the child abuse unit, July 2022 to August 29, you have been lead detective in other cases, or you were still in training?
So I see what you're saying. I'll try to explain it so it's better to understand. I would get assigned my own cases, and Detective Hoke would get assigned his own cases. As I worked through my cases, Detective Hoke was my person to go to and to ask questions. Where did I go next? What did I do next? That type of thing. So yes, I was lead in multiple investigations. However, I was still being trained and guided throughout those investigations.
But before that case, there hasn't been just any other child deaths prior to this?
I was not lead on any other child deaths.
Okay. Now moving on. When you first walked into that scene, you immediately were thinking of unsafe sleep conditions as well.
Yes, sir.
And you interviewed Dacia on scene that day.
Yes, sir.
It was a short interview,
Yes, sir.
about 7 minutes.
Roughly.
There was a little bit longer interview that happened with a DCS investigator.
The coroner.
Cool.
Yes, it was the coroner, DCS, and myself all present.
And that was about 39 minutes or so.
Roughly.
And he was talking, mostly asking questions about standard of care, questions in general about children, how she does things. Is that okay?
Correct, as the form is used during those child death investigations, typically.
So, you did say something today about her giving multiple stories. The multiple stories then would have happened in the January interview, is that right?
No, sir.
So she gave multiple stories on the 7 minutes that you did on 829? 7 minutes of interview?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. So you have interviewed Dacia Lacey 2 times, is that correct?
No, sir.
So you have
Well,
interviewed Dacia.
2 times that day or 2 times in general.
You interviewed her for 7 minutes on 829-22, and then you interviewed her for 3 hours on
Yes, sir.
January 23.
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so 2 interviews.
Yes, sir.
All right. So the multiple stories that she gave you were in both interviews, is what you're saying, or all in the 3-hour interview?
There was combinations between the statements I took from the officer and what he was told,
Okay.
between what she said during the coroner interview, which I was present for, as well as my short 7-minute interview, and then again during the 3-hour interview.
All right. And we agreed that the coroner investigator was focusing on standard of care, SUDI information, yes or no type question 4 that you went through. Is that right?
Part of that is how you found the baby. Part of that is part of my investigation as well.
Okay. Now, on 8/29, 29/22, you were talking or present while Dacia was talking for about 45 minutes between the 2 interviews.
For most of that, yes, sir.
You did not notice her being high, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. No falling asleep, slurred speech, anything like that.
She was just really soft-spoken. That was the biggest thing that I noticed. And again, like I said, through trauma training, I didn't take too big of a stock in that.
You did not document or notice her being high, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you discussed during that interview with her, on that day, the day you reported to the scene, there was this conversation about putting Alona to bed around 2 a.m., is that correct?
Which she and I
Yes.
would have to refer.
You can
Okay,
refresh your
thank you.
recollection. Also, if you have a copy of the protocols affidavit, you want to check that.
There was a lot of details, so I just want to make sure I'm correct.
That's fine.
Yes, sir, but I believe this looks like this was during the coroner's statement.
Okay, so there was a conversation about putting Alona to sleep around 2 a.m.
1 to 2 a.m.
Okay. And that's in putting her to sleep. This is also when the rubbing the bottle to her mouth was discussed.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, at the end of that day, 8/29/22, Dacia Lacey was not charged with any crimes.
Correct.
Children, as we heard previously, were not removed from the case. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, I want to move on quickly to, we heard from David Lacey yesterday. You have not interviewed David Lacey, is that right?
That is correct. I spoke to him on scene, but I didn't interview him.
Okay. No recorded statement.
No, sir.
Okay. Now, we saw pictures here today that were taken. These pictures were taken on scene, but the child had already been removed, put on the floor by EMT, things like that.
Yes, sir.
That's right. In other words, this is not exactly how you, this is how you maybe this is how you imagine the child was, but you don't know for sure if that's how she really was or not.
That is correct. Yes,
okay.
sir.
Now, I'm going to move on to the later stages of the investigation.
Okay.
Going forward, at some point, you learn about Grace state that way.
Yes, sir.
And at that point, you hadn't had the autopsy report yet.
That is correct.
So you talk to the doctor.
Yes, sir.
And you tell the doctor about Grace's statement. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Grace was then interviewed by a forensic interviewer.
Yes, she was interviewed.
And as you testified today, those are trained people to get statements out.
Not in that term, but it's trained individuals to be able to provide a safe environment for children to feel comfortable to be able to talk about whatever they need to talk
Whatever
about.
traumatic events that
Yes.
they witnessed.
Yes, sir.
And they are trained to make the children feel safe so they can say whether it is that they saw or no.
Yes, sir.
And Grace did not repeat in that interview what she had said previously.
That is correct.
Okay. And specifically, you testified today that these interviews are done in a non-leading manner. Is that correct?
Correct.
I want to talk to you next about the reenactment video.
Okay.
You were there when it was done,
Yes, sir.
and Alona had just been removed from the scene when it happened.
Yes, sir.
We saw an individual in that video. Was that the DCS in this video? In the reenactment video?
There were a few people in the video.
Specifically, there was a man dressed in like black.
No, sir, that was the coroner.
Okay.
Theodore Fears.
Yeah, that was him?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you were there, so was your training officer at the time?
Detective, yes, sir.
Yes. Now, no other police or medical professionals were on scene during that reenactment video?
I'm not sure where the police officers were during the video, but we did have police on scene.
Okay. Now, you testified today that you were on a probation period for about a year.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
right? And you also testified today to a number of training courses that you have done in 2023.
Yeah.
Since you have done the interview with Dacia in January, I believe it was January 18th of 2023, these training courses happened after that interview.
That is correct.
Okay. I want to talk to you about the I smothered my baby statement. At that point, because were you aware of other statements about I killed my baby outside the scene, outside the house, the day of the incident?
Are you referring to what Dacia's father said?
Correct.
I was not aware about that until yesterday in the courtroom.
Okay. Okay. You have never heard that before.
No, sir.
Right. Now, you testified today that she said in the 3-hour interview, I smothered my baby, but we will not be able to hear that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, as a trained detective, in general, trained detective interviewee, when someone makes what appears to be a confession, you are trained to elaborate and get more on that. Is that correct?
I don't know that I understand your question.
When someone makes what appears to you to be a confession, as a detective, you are trained to get into elaborate, talk more about it.
Yes, yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And you try to do that in this situation. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that did not result in us hearing I smothered my baby again. Is that right?
Right, she didn't say I smothered my baby again.
Okay. So the one time she said it, only you heard it and we can hear it. Is that right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. Even though when you try to get her to elaborate, she had just said a minute or two earlier. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so, yes. If I'm understanding you correctly.
Detective, I want to talk to you about the crease of the couch
Yes, sir.
that you testified to today. And as we said, the couch obviously didn't change position. The couch was always in that position. Is that right?
That is correct.
And is it fair to say the crease of the couch would have been towards Alona's left side?
I don't know how Alona was initially found
Yeah.
to be able to tell you.
In the pictures we saw, is it fair to say it was towards the crease, her left side? The crease was towards Alona's left side.
Correct, but she had already been moved.
Correct, and I understand.
Okay.
And in the reenactment video, the manner that Dacia pointed or acted like she did with Alona also was to her left side.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Redirect?
Thank you. I just want to circle back to a couple things with that. So we'll start with just back to kind of the scene. You were asked about you walk here looking for unsafe sleep situations. Is that always what you do if it's an infant death? Is that always something that you have to investigate?
Can you rephrase your question?
It was a long question. If you are responding to an infant death, is unsafe sleep always something you're going to investigate regardless of the circumstances?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That was better, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And we had talked a little bit about kind of the drugs that Dacia thought she was taking or that she actually did take. Did you do some research on those drugs just so you understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And with meth, did you kind of learn that there was a come down period afterwards?
There is, yes.
And you talked to Dacia about that a lot in her interview, correct?
I did.
Okay. Now let's go to the forensic interview process. The purpose of a forensic interview is not to elicit a disclosure from a child. It's just to give them the space to disclose if they want to, correct?
That is correct.
So, in fact, an interviewer is prohibited by protocol from asking them direct questions.
Yes, a child forensic interviewer, as a law enforcement officer and also a child forensic interviewer, I would typically have leeway. However, I wasn't a child forensic interviewer at that time.
Sure. So the interviewer, that this is all they do, even if they know that the interview is about baby Alona, they can't go in there and be like, talk about baby Alona.
Correct.
Okay. In your interview, we've kind of talked about, you hear her saying, I smothered her, and you did interview training prior to this interview. Your other law enforcement training.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So some of your detective and child abuse training has come after this case, but you did have a foundation of interview school.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when you're hearing her say smother, you are repeating it back to her. Is that correct?
Yes, throughout the follow-up I did.
Okay. And I have that you probably said that to her about 5 times. Did she then ever come back and say, no, that's not what I said?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And in fact, she acknowledged to you that she was aware of things like not putting infants on the couch, not putting clothes around them, and things like that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we've talked a lot about Alona's positioning. The only person that knows how Alona was found is Dacia Lacey, correct?
That is correct.
And Dacia Lacey has not told law enforcement, CS, or anyone a consistent story about how Alona was found.
That's correct.
None further. Oh, Judge, I do have just omitted. I'll move to Exhibit 19 as the demonstrative, which is a transcript.
No, sorry. Sheriff states 19 admitted for demonstrative purposes with the understanding that 18 is the actual evidence. 19 is there simply to assist the court. At 18, any differences between 18 and 19, 18 is the actual evidence. Anything further questions from the defense?
Yeah, Judge.
Okay.
Detective, you have not been present during the forensic interview, is that correct?
I was present.
When Grace was an interviewer, in the room you were there?
Not in the room. I was watching it live on a screen.
Okay, but so you were,
I apologize. I didn't understand what you meant by
you were not in
present.
the room, but you did watch it. That's really my point.
That is correct.
And in that interview, baby Alona was mentioned by Grace, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Conversation was discussed. Alona was discussed.
Yes, sir.
Grace just didn't say anything that allegedly she said to everyone else outside that room. Is that right?
That's correct.
Because we did hear Jennifer yesterday testify to Grace saying this to the friends and family, someone at school or church, something like that. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
She just didn't say it in the forensic interview.
That is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Just briefly.
Okay.
Every forensic interview kind of starts with family dynamics, correct?
Yes, sir. Pardon me. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Nervous. Sorry.
But then the interviewer can't ask anything else. It's a day or event, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further.
Okay. In terms of my notes, tell me again, when did Grace do her forensic interview? What date?
I believe it was January 7th, but I can check my notes really fast. Or I'm sorry, not January.
It was Grace, not Dacia.
Did I say Dacia?
No, but my question is...
Oh, okay, yes, Grace. It was September 7th, 2022.
I believe you indicated that the pack and play was not a safe place for Alona to sleep, is that right?
Yes, sir. That pack and play had several items in it.
Right, so I'm clear, since in terms of my male lack of knowledge, we're looking at the item that states 15 and 16, correct? The blue rectangular object?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, was it unsafe because of the clutter that was inside? Or would it have been unsafe even all the items contained within 15 and 16, or the pack and play? If it had been empty, would it have been in a safe place?
I honestly would have to see the bottom of the pack and play to know, because babies need to be on a harder surface, flat surface. Some pack and plays are different than others and are not safe.
But if it came from a manufacturer, generally you would have anticipated that it would have been a safe place, would it not?
Potentially,
you're not
yes.
saying pack and plays generally are unsafe
Potentially, like I said,
because of a lack of hard surface on the bottom?
yeah, and I've had other investigations where they were not safe.
Okay. But your primary determination for 15 and 16, I assume, was because of the clutter inside?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the bed itself would never have been a proper place, correct?
That is correct. You're referring to Dacia's bed?
Dacia's bed, right.
Yes.
A 2-month-old should never be sleeping with an adult.
That is
in an
correct.
adult bed.
That is correct.
You were asked whether or not, on your initial investigation going to the scene, that you didn't see any signs of the defendant being intoxicated or high at that time. And primarily you noticed that she was soft-spoken. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Were you surprised when the tox results came back the way they did?
Not-
Based on your observation of her?
Not really. The soft-spoken kind of makes a little more sense with someone coming off of meth, but I would have never have guessed she had meth on board that day.
I think those are all the questions I have prior to looking at the actual statement itself. Questions on the court's question statement?
No.
Defense? Welcome back.
And Judge, may we get the pictures? Thank you. Detective, the rolling bill was taken that potentially that Friday before the Monday when you talked to the Friday or Saturday before the Monday when you talked to the patient. Is that right?
That weekend, either between Friday and Sunday, from my understanding with the different statements I got.
Okay. Detective, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 14. That's, I believe, is another pack and play. If the items that we see at the bottom of that were removed, would that make it a safe place to sleep in for infants?
I honestly be able to answer that unless it was like right here and I could look at it and feel the bottom.
Okay.
Sorry.
There are items I think we can see in the picture. If we remove them and it's empty, would it be safe?
Again, I'm not able to answer that.
It's the same question I asked her, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Depends on the quality and the hardness of the surface.
Yes, sir.
What you don't know.
Which I don't know. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, further questions from the
No,
defense?
Judge, thank you.
Any state?
Yes, the pack and play that Mr. Mansour showed you, that was for Julius, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And it would not have been safe for Julius and Alona to be sleeping together at 1 and 2 months, is that correct?
That is correct.
Nothing more.
Nothing, Judge, on that, Judge.
So basically what you're saying, it's never safe to put two kids in the same pack and play.
That is correct.
Sleep with them. Okay, very good. Anything else?
No, Judge.
No, Judge.
Okay. All right. At this point then, do we have any other evidence for the court to consider other than going through State's Exhibit 18 and 19?
No.
That's anything other than what I need to review 18 and 19 at this time?
No, Judge.
Okay. And just for scheduling purposes, other than that, do you have any other witnesses after her?
We should not anticipate.
Okay, so the state would be anticipating arresting at that point.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And have you actually timed 18? Just how long it is?
It is 3 hours. There are some timestamps that the court can skip, like, I think there's 15 minutes at the beginning that you can kind of skip over, but,
Does the defense agree?
Yes, Judge.
Tell me, and I can skip over what?
so if you look at the transcript, there's a timestamp.
Okay.
And there's like right here, it says 13:36, speaking while walking in the room. So you can start there. There's a couple places throughout where it says that, like, Detective Hadley leaves the room. Honestly, those are not for more than longer than 5 minutes, so it might not be worth skipping, because I think the video might not restart.
You want me to see the pauses? Or?
I do not want you to see the voltage. I don't, unless you want to, of course. But,
All right. Well, either way, both sides agree it doesn't have, the pauses don't have evidentiary value.
That's correct.
Correct.
All right.
But I'm just, there's not, like, I know some interviews have like an hour of dead time in the middle. That is not this.
Okay. All right. Well, time is 10:20. I do have a 10:30 calendar. And I'm probably going to start pretty soon, right?
yes.
Okay.
Please.
The tape. I do have, I will take lunch. And so there'll probably be an hour break then. What I will do is notify you when I've finished the tape. And from there, my assumption is based on what you told me before, both sides will have additional questions for the detective. Is that fair? Or not? Or have you already covered?
We are done with the detective. Let's say ask
Okay.
questions.
All right. All right. So my assumption is that when I'm done, when I come back, the state will have rested.
Yes.
Okay. And so does the defense intend to put on any evidence?
As of right now, no.
Okay. All right. So once I finish the tape, then I'll alert both sides. We can come back and then do argument and finish it up then. Fair? Okay.
We'll likely need a different court for the insurance.
Yes, likely need a different court.
Is that confirmed the location?
All right, so you'll get the location from Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Knight. All right, anything further from either side? You can step in.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from the state? Anything further from the defense? All right, court will be in recess then.
All right. Live and business.
You have 2 seconds, I think. One of the pictures and that.